What did you mean, give people 5 minutes? I didn't catch that.
Well, just like I did here, to
Oh,
start
I
this
see. Yeah.
webinar, I'm
Okay.
giving people 5 minutes. I notice they do that in theaters
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
um, and uh, what we're going to be talking about today, the first topic, as you see here, and I think all know, is our first announcement for the app 2016. And we're going to be doing lots of predictions which have time frames associated with them. Um, and so time is a very important thing to us. Okay, so the first topic will in fact be, and I'll be getting right into that, App 2016, where we're really very excited about it, and I'll be telling you about that. As it stands now, everything is, this is very early in the process, um, as you'll see. And then the second topic is uh, something I've really kind of been working on for many, many, many years. As you get into precognition, you just take on the issue of consciousness, precognition just being one aspect of consciousness, and what it all means. And this is my take on it with my physics background. So I will connect with a little bit of physics, nothing at all complicated, but consciousness is fundamental, and that's the basis of the model. And there's a metaphor which I think will help us all understand it, which is consciousness is like a circle without a boundary. So that'll be the second topic, and then we can get on to anything else. So first, let me give you what I'm calling the early overview of App 2016. It's going to be where we've had it in the past, except for last year, which was in New Orleans, and that's at the Green Valley Ranch Hotel and Casino. It'll be June 13th to the 16th. So that's a Monday through Thursday. And Dean Radin and Joe McMonagle have already agreed to participate. So they're players. Joe is coming for sure. Dean, we're hoping, will come, and he is considering it, and he's got to talk it over with his wife and that sort of thing. So he has not made a commitment to come in person, but we do hope to get him there in person. And we already are making contacts with a lot of other people whose names I won't give you, who are kind of heavy hitters in this general field. But I don't want to give you their names just so only I will be disappointed and a few others that are making those contacts. Okay, now here's the rest of it kind of as the overview. We're going this time from what has been one kind of intimate group. We always had a suite and in Vegas, and we had like maybe 30 people there. But now we really want to get 100 plus participants. But the last thing we want is to have it to be, your father's conference with all the seats lined up in front of a screen and the speaker up in the front. We really don't want that because we don't think, for one thing, it encourages precognition. We want people to really form a group, get a sense of a group, get a sense of group energy enhancing everybody's precognitive capabilities. And so what we're talking about here is having a room which might be set up with something like 8 tables. Each table will have 14 people. So the first idea here, and I've already talked to Green Valley Ranch, and they're seeing how this will lay out in one of their big conference rooms. So the idea then would be to have 8 tables like here with a center area that would be where speakers would talk. So it's sort of like a theater in the round. I don't know if any of you have ever been to those, but I have, and they work. It's a little bit harder on the presenters because, you know, they want to look at everybody. But nevertheless, it works. It's much more intimate, and of course the tables are much more intimate. So each table would then have a app facilitator, not only encouraging rapport, but the sense is that we would hope there might be enough rapport that these people might later form an actual app groups. All of them, some subset of them, might then want to come into app afterwards. Join existing app groups, start a whole new group if they're all newbies, whatever. You know, we'll have to see how that goes. But each group now would be an operational ARV group. They will be able to make independent predictions, which, and it turned out Scott was the first one to suggest this, which would permit us to now do parlay type wagering, where you could wager on the outcome of the whole game, but you could also wager simultaneously on the outcome of the first 5 innings. They just have so many different kinds of wagers that you could do, and you could parlay those wagers. So in principle, with a relatively small amount of money at risk, if all of them come in, and that's the way a parlay works, they all have to come in, you could get a very high payout in terms of your wager, you know, 5-10 times what you wagered if the parlay is big enough. So that also adds sort of to the fun to it. Okay, so that really is the general idea. One thing which worked out really well in App Fest, which we did have in Vegas in a conference room, in a suite, which in fact we filled, was this idea of Play-Doh, and where we go to kind of the next level in remote viewing, where not only do you do a transcript, but you actually physically make a model representing what it is you're viewing. And so that was a lot of fun, and we'll do that again. So I can see that being in the central area here. Okay, so let's now go to the details. Let's see, now close that. I'm just trying to find my, okay, here. So if you go to appliedprecog.com, this is now live. So we're now on our app main website. Then down here is the link to get to the details, and that's what we have here. So this is what is up there now, including the potential to register. And as you're going to see, you know, we're early in the process. I can't tell you the names of the other speakers because there's no confirmation of them yet. And because of that, we are having what we call a super early bird special. So one of the things which we're hoping, and this webinar is going to be out there, we're hoping a lot of people will listen to it and in fact register early for these 4 days, which will include full lunch all 4 days. We're doing everything we can think of to keep people together. Just so they'll get to know each other. It was kind of amazing at AppFest how much people repeated over and over again, my gosh, it is so great to be people who think like we do. We can talk to other people who understand this precognition thing. We're still in the state where most of us do not have very many friends or associates who we can spend time talking about this to. They may not believe it, but even if they believe it, they're not particularly interested. So in fact, so that's one of the reasons for doing the luncheons together. So the main theme here, as you can see, is consciousness is fundamental, precognition, and we will be talking about the connection with consciousness, precognition, and health, wealth, and wisdom. And then the super early bird registration is $345. The full price, when we get probably, I don't know, when we, the idea here is to have then an early bird, which might be different by a lot. I mean, here you're saving $180. When we go to the early bird, it might be $100. We don't really know yet. But the full price, if you come in right near the end, probably 3 weeks, a month, at the end, will be $525. Now, we have this approach, which we always have. This is for paid members. Most of the people who are hearing this now are only talking about this within app so far. I guess we'll distribute this webinar outside of app, and that makes sense. But we want people to become paid members so they can do that first for $50, and then they save the $50. So we expect 99% of the people to in fact be working under this approach. So that link is hot, and the Green Valley, of course, is a very interesting place to be. We will have a suite, and we may very well want to have a cocktail party or something like that up there as well. So Dina signed up, Joe is signed up, I'm signed up. Okay, so any questions, comments on that? Feel comfortable with this?
Just a quick question. The website says that the rooms are going fast. Have we had some bookings, and should we get on that quickly?
In fact, all of you, when you look at this in detail, some of this was just written, copied, some of it from what was there before. So please, please point that stuff out to us. So where does it say that, John?
I'd have to go look, but I'm not sure. Maybe Deborah knows exactly, but maybe it's a leftover from before. I don't know. There are a few leftovers on the website.
Well, no, but you saw it here. You saw it say that here, because if we can find it, then we can correct it.
Are you guys talking about the hotel room?
Yeah, John said he saw they're going fast.
Oh, let's see. Did it look? Keep scrolling down there. Okay, and stop right there. It says room block has been reserved. And then it says please return here. Let's
see, group discount. Right. See, we haven't gotten all of that done yet. Well, maybe you saw it in an earlier version, John.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was an earlier version. Some of the stuff I just copied from the last.
Right. But if you do find anything that's here now, any of you, please let us know, because as I've now explained, this is a very early version, but we want the word to get out there. We want people to make their plans and decisions as early as possible. And at this point, everything is sort of within the closed community. We will start much broader advertising later. We intend to go to the full consciousness community. Deborah and others have connections with other places where we will be giving workshops and encouraging people then to come here. So all of that is going to be happening in the next couple of months or so to get people to come to this conference in June. We think it's very important, frankly, to, I don't know how to say this, I'm just going to say spread the word, just because we know reality includes precognition. We know consciousness has capabilities which are so far greater than most people accept. And that includes areas like health, that we feel that's important to spread to society. And that is clearly one of our motivating factors for trying to grow and get to 100 people this time and just continue growing to get the word out there. Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay. Deborah, you have anything you want to add? You feel comfortable with the way I presented this?
Yeah, it sounds really good. I'm just wondering for the website. I'm still, that page is a work in progress, and it's still,
right.
I'm not thrilled with how it looks right now, but does anyone have a problem with like the sparkly, glittery approach, or is that too cheesy? Because I could either kind of play up on that or, you know, try to get more classy looking.
You mean right there?
Kind of, yeah, there, just the gold stuff. Do you like that, or is that cheesy?
I like it.
Not bad.
I like it.
Yeah, okay. It works.
The overall color scheme needs to be fixed up a little.
You know, the gold connects up with the wealth in a way. It'd be nice to have a symbol that connected up with wisdom too, but maybe this does that.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Okay. No, I like it. Any other comments? And as you can tell, please, if you have comments, email us. Any suggestions? We're quite open to that. That's always our approach at APP. Hey, you know, we may say hell no, but we want to hear about it. Okay, so let's go to topic 2. Here's what we're going to do. The overall theme, consciousness is fundamental. Now, what I'm going to do really fits in the context of a lot of people who have put together what they call theory of everything. Most physicists, classical physicists, theory of everything, only try to include things like quantum mechanics and the general theory of relativity. They do not discuss at any fundamental level consciousness. That's because they don't have a clue on how to do that. I finally concluded the reason they don't have a clue on how to do that is because if the most fundamental thing of all is consciousness itself, you know, you can't you can't come up with other things to explain it. You have to start with consciousness. And so that's the approach that's taken here that you'll see. And while the physics community hasn't been successful at this, what you're going to see has in fact been done in terms of the kind of antiquity models of the world and the universe. So a lot of what I'm showing you, in fact, will not be new. But I think the way I connect it with physics at least is interesting. But again, other people have done similar things. What I like about this approach in particular is it makes precognition obvious. And if you have a theory of everything, we know precognition is real. So it needs to explain that. I will be bringing into the model specifically ARV as well as precognition. So you're going to see how the model discusses that and even makes suggestions about it. which has always been what I felt is lacking in other models of, theories of everything or whatever. Okay, how do you come up with some predictions that you might make, and maybe even predictions which could be tested? Okay, a circle without a boundary, I think, just helps understand the ideas here, and that's clearly a metaphor, and you'll see that, and then you'll see how this does fit up with ARP. Okay, you ready? That's how we start.
Ready for nothing?
Exactly. Exactly. This approach starts with nothing. Okay? Now, turns out nothing, zero, notice nothing means no things, right? Zero things. Starting there. But notice what we're really doing is starting with the idea of nothing. I mean, as soon as I put up that screen, that wasn't really nothing, was it? We have this vague idea of nothing, and it's this idea which may be real to us. Okay? And what are we in fact conscious of? We're conscious of the idea. So that's really where I want to start, is with ideas and the fact that we can be conscious of ideas. Consciousness is the thing which you are probably the most sure of. I think you heard that sound. You're hearing my voice. Right now, you have no doubt that this very moment that you're experiencing is real, period. The past is a memory. It was sort of real. The future is going to become as real as this moment, but it's not now. This now moment is what's real. That is your consciousness now. Okay? Idea. Well, it's an entity. We're going to use the word thing as opposed to entity. But it's a thought, a concept. They put sensations, an image, actually or potentially present to consciousness. I love it. So the word idea fits in perfectly here in the way we're using it. A formulated thought or opinion. Whatever is known or supposed about something. Okay? A child's idea of time, which is in fact, I think, where we still are. Okay, so notice I started with no thing, but now we got to this idea. And it's this idea within consciousness that is real. So I now want to introduce right now this basic idea of where this model starts, which is a universe of collective consciousness, a UCC. So this idea of nothing is in this UCC. So the blue circle right now represents the UCC, and nothing is in there. But when we say that, I mean the idea of nothing is in there, because that's what consciousness touches. That's another word I'll use. I don't know, language here is very difficult at this fundamental level, but nothing is touched by consciousness. You've just experienced the idea of it as we've discussed. So you're conscious of nothing? Well, we're going to use that language, but you are really conscious of the idea of nothing. Now, nothing is an example of a consciousness thing. So the word thing I'm going to use in a very general way. Now, this UCC, hopefully you've got enough of an idea that you can see it's really like what's called the matrix in our remote viewing world. Ingo Swann used that word. I think he was the one who introduced it in this context. I'm not sure, but certainly that word was introduced at very early on. Anyway, we talk about the matrix as being the place we go to get information, remote viewing information. Well, the UCC would be just like that. And it's also really, as far as I can tell, the idea of Jung's, which is the collective unconscious, something so fundamental that archetypes might come out of it. You know, it's not the archetypes themselves, it's the place that things come from, which is kind of the basic definition also of a matrix, and it's the basic definition we're talking about here with the UCC. And maybe it's a container, but it's the most fundamental thing that you can find. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this universe of collective consciousness so you can really kind of get it. Hey, we started with nothing, but notice having nothing, what was that? We put it in there. That was one thing. Well, once we had nothing and we had one thing, we really had two things. And then we had three things. So all the numbers from zero, we sort of thought we started with zero. You get all the numbers and all of that is in there. Okay. So we get this concept now of nothing only being one thing in here. We've managed to get all the numbers. But notice, even as we're talking, isn't it clear that these things are entangled with each other? And we just have to kind of recognize these things. So all the things we're putting in here are entangled with each other. Now, what have we been doing? We've been thinking. We're conscious of our own thinking. Hey, that goes back a long way. I don't know the history, but I think, therefore I am. Philosophy, which is really the basics of physics if you go back to antiquity. We're thinking. So that's in there, right? The idea of thinking. Thinking is in there. What about emotions? Things like love. Now, love immediately brings you to this connection of I and you. Now, I have a concept of me. You have a concept of you. But I also have a concept of you. And all of these things are really felt, known. All of this is connected through consciousness. Everything I know about you, actually I know because of stuff which I found out through conscious relationships, thinking about you, stuff which we've done together. If you think about it, that's even true of what I know about myself. It's only stuff which I've been conscious of within my own being. So I and you are obviously biggies. Now, I want to go back to mathematics. I had the numbers. All the mathematics are in this collective consciousness place. The idea of time, okay? Time is here. Space is here. This is the idea that any of these ideas, what I know about me, what I know about you, guess what? In this universe of collective consciousness, past, present, future, my conscious moments, your conscious moments, are in here. They're kind of eternal. Just like a number one might be considered eternal, it's in there forever. Well, so are any of my conscious experiences, your conscious experiences from sentient beings anywhere. If they exist, they're in there. That's how the universe of collective consciousness needs to be thought of. Now, vibrations, the change in these things are very important. As soon as you introduce time, you get vibrations. You pretty quickly get all the equations of physics are in there. And in fact, the fact that in the real physical world, we have conscious experiences. You know, we get to be alive. So you've got biology in there. You've got the mind in there. You've got psychology. All of this is in the universe of collective consciousness. I've now introduced a capital I just so I could talk about the distinction between the idea of something, and we can talk about ideas of things, but then there's this real physical world that we experience. We really see it as a physical world. It is a physical world. That's the I. I have no doubt that I am living in a physical world. There's some people who say somehow they try to make that not real. I don't make that real. I know I live in the physical world. However, I believe it comes from this universe of collective consciousness. The source of it is this fundamental consciousness matrix, if you will. I have all these experiences. I know my experiences are real. That's the thing I know the most, my conscious experiences. Well, those conscious experiences and the fact that I can talk to other people about it is what I mean by an objective physical world. I live in an objective physical world. Most things most people do agree on. I've got the capital U. You're in the physical world too. Beliefs, very important. Those beliefs have been generated and are in this collective consciousness, this universe of collective consciousness. All these kind of things that you see, they're in there. Notice concepts like a hat, okay? We make those concepts. They're in this, but they're part of what we have created. But guess what? As we create them, they go into this universe of collective consciousness. We have language. I just thought of this one right now because I know remote viewers who never knew a language were able to translate newspaper from a foreign language. How did that happen? That happens because it goes down into the universe of collective consciousness. Translations and all that stuff can happen in this idea space. Then it comes back up to the remote viewer. That'll make sense to people who understand all the wonderful things that remote viewing has done. And that's explained by this model because it goes down to the universe of collective consciousness, mixes with all of this other very general things, like translators, and can come back up. Hey, what about things like this that are in there? Spaceships are in there, right? Everything we know about a spaceship is in the physical world, which has been experienced by consciousness. There's nothing in the physical world that has not been experienced by consciousness or wouldn't be in the physical world. There's nothing that you can point to that is not in the universe of collective consciousness. If you point to something, say, hey, there's something new. Well, as soon as you pointed to it, it's into the universe of collective consciousness. Notice also the entanglement. That rocket ship connects up with NASA. People, the I and the U. But as soon as you show a picture like that, it connects up with so much, with physics, with everything. The entanglements are important. So the idea of Einstein entangles with a lot. How about Elvis? Everybody know Elvis? Or is that just my generation? I think this generation knows Elvis. Hey, some people believe he's still alive physically right now. Hey, that's their belief system. They want to fool around with that. That's fine. Beliefs are an important part of how these different ideas get entangled. Okay, so I hope you got this idea of the universe of collective consciousness. It's the fundamental of everything, and everything comes out of it. So, everything, I'm now going to use this red thing with a black around it, to be a thing. So everything that consciousness touches, past, present, future, other dimensions, everything you can imagine is represented by this blue circle. Okay, so that's the blue circle. Here's a thing in it. But there's a but here. And here's where I want to give you this metaphor of a circle without a boundary. Think about it. If you have any thought, you have an emotion, you try to point to a physical thing, as I said already, which you're contending, you're hypothesizing is outside that circle. I claim as soon as you do that, as soon as you even think about doing that, it automatically goes inside the circle. So the very act of trying to put something outside the circle puts it in the circle. Therefore, there's no boundary. There's literally no thing that you can point to, that you can suggest, that you can hint at, that's outside that circle. And that's kind of cool, actually. You know, we think our physical universe is like that. You can't get outside our physical universe. So that's kind of an interesting comparison. I'm not sure there are that many other sets that are like that. If you stay within numbers, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you get an infinity of numbers, and you can't go outside of that within the concept of just numbers. Okay, so that's a kind of set that within that concept of numbers you can't get outside. But this is so much bigger than that. Nothing can get outside this circle. So this is literally a circle without a boundary. Okay. Now, I want to get into something else. Notice I put black around this circle without a boundary, because that's itself an idea. So that idea is actually inside here. And so it's a thing. And it's a thing with a fuzzy boundary. The black lines here represent what I like to call fuzzy boundaries. Now, I want you to understand fuzzy boundaries, because they're, I believe, very, very important. And I believe this is what connects up with physics and the physical world, that separates the kind of idea world from the physical world, fuzzy boundaries. Okay, so we have our circle, we have our thing with a fuzzy boundary. So we've now started talking about individual things. Well, first remember that no boundary implies no separation, implies a kind of oneness and a harmony. Well, as soon as we want to think about a thing, it can't be completely separated from the circle without a boundary, because if you say it's completely separated, you're saying there's a boundary there, which, you know, no line, red next to the green with a distinct boundary. Well, we've already decided there are no boundaries. This is a circle without a boundary. So what we have here is something which needs a label. Let's call it a fuzzy boundary. It's sort of like a boundary, but not really. Okay? So anything, as soon as you start trying to think about it as being separate, you're no longer in total oneness. You're no longer in total harmony, because you're now saying, oh, here's something which is separate. Okay? I am a separate thing. You are a separate thing. There has to be a fuzzy boundary there. And of course, you know, if you think about that, that's true, because it's entangled, it's connected with other stuff that happens to be in the UCC. I'm connected right now with you through the UCC. You're listening to me. Okay. Now here is, I don't know quite what the right word is. Logicians would probably know better. If this is a axiom, a postulate, a hypothesis, it's something like that. Whoops. And it's the fact that to leave this harmonious state, to even think about something being separate, requires energy. So energy. So I've now introduced this word energy in a special way, which of course connects with our physical world. And there's a very generalized energy. I mean this in the most general way I can ever imagine, because it's coming from this fundamental thing of consciousness. And in fact, it is true. If you just think about it, if nothing else, my brain, in the way of thinking about a new idea, there's a certain amount of energy required there. And there's certainly energy involved when you move things around and stuff like that. So, it seems to be the right word. So energy is required to create this thing that has a fuzzy boundary. And I don't know much more about it at this point. Let me now connect this to ARV and precognition and events. Events obviously fit in here very nicely, because what are events? Let's just talk about your events. Events are something which happen, one event. Okay, so one of these or one event happens to you. You go to a baseball game. You're here now. This event. Well, when did it start exactly? Did it start when you joined this particular webinar by GoToMeeting? Did it start when you first heard the announcement? See, that's an example of the fuzziness of this webinar and your experience of this webinar. So, it's got fuzziness around it. Well, guess what? There are a lot of events. Virtually, I would say, certainly all people kind of define their events at one level or another, and they may not even say it out loud, but when they think about it, yeah, baseball game was an event, this was an event. So you understand the concept of event. One event happens usually in one generalized location, and goes over some finite period of time, and that's generally what one person's event would be. Okay, so each of these events are things, right? And of course, in this universe of collective consciousness, I would venture to say they're very close to an infinite number of events, right? There are lots of entities, a lot of people who are doing lots of different things. So you could easily categorize them into lots of events. But one thing which we're able to do, and if we didn't do it, our lives would be very different. We're able to ignore lots of events. Now, one way of thinking about that is we decrease the entanglement with there. That event was still there. That birthday party I went to when I was 10 years old, my birthday party, it's still there. It's still in the UCC. But I certainly don't remember anything about it. But it's there. But I basically forgot it. Okay? So let's just take two events, and I maintain that if you even start thinking about these two events, you're increasing the entanglement between those two events, because guess what? You're putting energy into those two events. Okay? So you can increase the entanglement of those two events. When we remember past events, and we remember them a lot, when we study something a lot, that becomes a kind of event, and we can add energy to it. Well, just for an example, which might be relevant, let's suppose one event is you doing your remote viewing session. Okay? So here you are doing your remote viewing session at one time in one location. Now, the other event is at a different time. It might be a similar location, but it's certainly a different time, and it could be at a different location. Doesn't matter. You're doing your feedback session here. You're putting energy into it both times. Notice how that line got thicker? I love PowerPoint. That stuff is easy to do. Your consciousness creates a handshake. It's kind of a handshake. One of the physicists has a model where he uses that word. I like that word. Can create a handshake between these two events, and you can enhance the entanglement energy. Now, the only way to prove this, but the fact that we can prove this, is one of the things about this model that at least I like. It comes out of the model rather naturally, because when you say you have these fuzzy boundaries, the fuzzy boundaries are what connect you up with the UCC and then with everything else. Here I am. I know I have lots of experiences where I've tried to enhance memories, for example. And in fact, in my own precognition work, I have worked to enhance consciousness, and I believe it's helped. My remote viewing, I believe, is getting better. I'm gathering statistics on that, as others are. So this is now a belief system, but one which could be tested. One which says, yes, you can, in fact, limit your view of events, and you can increase the entanglement between them such that information from the feedback event can in fact be shared with the remote viewing event through time. So just like space, same thing is happening with space. Why do you think most, not all, but most remote viewing has feedback and attention is paid to it? At SRI, they had outbounder effects. They would go out to the site, which was remote viewed, and spend time there, increasing the energy there with the same people, increasing the energy and getting these wonderful examples that you've all seen. I claim that's an example of a handshake through time between a remote viewing session and a feedback session. Okay, so this model brings that in directly. Okay, so now my physics self says, let's see if there are some connections here with quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the most fundamental physics model that we have now about our universe at the level of starting at the very small and trying to build up from there. Well, I'm going to connect this now with, guess what? The fuzzy boundaries. Now, there's something called the uncertainty principle, a Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It basically relates time and energy changes at a very, very fundamental level, which says that if you take a very, very small interval of time, you can associate the smallest amount of energy that would be associated with that time increment. And that is in such a fashion that if the time increment gets smaller and smaller, the well, let me just say it this way: the time increment cannot go to zero and get zero energy. Okay, that's what I want to say. A consequence of the uncertainty principle is that over any, and remember, we're talking physical world now, that over any finite time interval, no matter how small, there will be some energy associated with that time interval anywhere in the universe, anywhere in the spatial universe. And that time interval, because you're doing a measurement now, will never get to zero energy. So there is no place in the physical world where there will be zero energy. So that's the uncertainty principle. And that fits in exactly with what fuzzy boundaries do. If you have the idea of anything in the physical world, we've postulated, let's say, that that's going to take a certain amount of energy. So I really do see going from the idea world to the physical world through a physical boundary, that the uncertainty principle is right there. So this boundary is definitely fuzzy and in uncertain ways. Now, let's talk about entanglement energy. This energy that comes up through the fuzzy boundary is the thing which keeps you connected to the UCC. So you have these things and they seem separate, but in fact they're not. So this entanglement energy, this EE, entangles everything to the UCC, and through that, in some magical non-local way, because once you're down to the UCC, hell, it was the thing which created time, you're automatically connected to everything. This is the oneness, the harmony idea. So you're connected to everything else through the UCC. And this leads, well, okay, so those two things actually are very big in terms of quantum mechanics. The fundamental assumptions in quantum mechanics has to do with entanglement energy, entanglement itself, right? Non-local entanglement, faster than the speed of light, and the uncertainty principle. Now, this gets connected to zero-point energy. Before I do that, and this in many of your minds I'm sure is fuzzy, and that's good. This fuzziness is, you know, consciousness is fundamental, so please kind of enjoy this. Hopefully you're picking up the general concepts. I will tell you that Richard Feynman, Nobel laureate quantum mechanics, said, I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. So understanding these general concepts with just the intellect is tough. Turns out it's easier if you're willing to trust a deeper part of yourself, say an intuitive part of yourself that's actually closer to this UCC. It's down right closer to the level of pure consciousness, right at this interface. And we all have that. We're all alive. So, but I do want to go, let me just go a little further. You know, we've talked about the physical world, we've talked about the world of ideas, and the two are connected now through consciousness, the UCC. So the brain is physical, and it really does physically have two parts, which of course are connected. Consciousness now is more fundamental than the physical. I certainly have tried to make that point here. Now, consciousness entangles life. Consciousness touches all that is. This universe of collective consciousness, all that is just as good a phrase for it, because as I think you now understand, everything that you can imagine, ideas, physical world, everything that matters is in there. 0-point energy is a concept which comes out of quantum mechanics, and it's related directly to this Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which says there is no place where you can have zero energy. In fact, quantum mechanics predicts that if you go to any place in the universe, but let's go now to a place where we would think there's nothing between the galaxies, and it looks like there's nothing there, and you get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you get very, very small, practically to zero. As you get closer and closer to zero, you're going to start seeing energy pop in and pop out. Things like, let's say, electrons and anti-electrons, positons, and in and out. But there's always energy there. And that's called 0-point energy. It turns out the magnitude of that energy is as large as, per cubic centimeter, as large as the energy in a nuclear weapon when it first goes off. So we are all sitting on top of, if you will, again, another metaphor, language is hard here, enormous amounts of energy. Potential is huge. Hal Puthoff is working on trying, and others are working on trying to get that energy into a useful form here. Some people call it free energy. But there's no debate that that energy is in fact there. I would like to think that energy, in fact, is the connecting energy between the UCC and the physical world. All of that is happening at the same time, but what's called 0-point energy is the connector between the pure idea, say, non-physical world and the physical world. I want to make this just a little more credible by showing these paramecium, and on their tip here, right here, they're called cilia, and they're microtubules. This is one, I'm cutting one of these microtubules, so you're looking straight down through it. Well, they're cilias, I'm sorry, that's a cilia, but looking straight down through the cilia, and it's very, very small, are these microtubules. You see these little circles right here? I think there's 16 of them or something like that. So this is the thing which makes them move and they sense. Inside that are these microtubules. Well, these microtubules may very well be small enough and long enough, the combination, that they have quantum mechanical effects in them at normal temperatures. Some of that is still debatable. What we're now talking about is all cutting edge. But there are people out there, very well-known scientists, that are putting models together that say that's how quantum mechanics interacts with us at that level. We have in our cells billions, trillions of these microtubules. These are cells from pancreas at the level of DNA in blue, and the green are microtubules. These very, very, very small things, which on their walls, which again are very thin, and inside them are all connected to, guess what? 0-point energy level, because as you get small, small, small in terms of each one of those, you connect up with 0-point energy, and then you connect up with the UCC, which means you're connected up to the entire universe. That's how I see the connections going. Now, you'd think I would stop there, because that's a lot, because I've now given you really a complete model of what we do. But I even want to go one step further. The 0-point energy, and this is just the artist's conception of it. The 0-point energy, which is present at all locations and time in our physical universe, you can't come up with many other things that are present at every place, every time in our universe, and nobody disagrees with it. Okay? So that's science. Maybe one of the most significant things science has ever really proven is that 0-point energy, in fact, is real and is everywhere. How do I prove it's every time? But it's everywhere. That, I guess, has been proven. But I would say it's probably also proven it's at every time. Now, I want to connect this up with gravity, because physics, classical physics, is having trouble connecting connecting quantum mechanics, the very small, with gravity. I'm going to make the hypothesis, the claim, that gravity, in fact, is the result of all locations and time being connected through 0-point energy, being connected through the UCC in a non-local way. So, right, any mass that we call mass in the physical world is connected. In fact, and every element, every molecule in mass, in you, in fact, has within it connections through ZPE, through the 0-point energy field, to the universe of collective consciousness. Well, that's true of mass too. And if you remember, those of you who took at least some initial physics, the force between two mass elements, and this is Newton's law of gravitation, has the product of the two masses times a gravitational constant divided by the distance between them is the force. I want you to notice there's no time element there. If I change the distance, instantly the force changes. This is, in fact, a non-local equation, which I just happened to think of as I was putting all of this together, which is rather interesting. You don't need extra dimensions to explain that. Who knows? It may be that with ideas that we're putting out here with consciousness, you won't need to explain gravity. Some mathematician might very well explain gravity with using the ZPE concepts and the concept of consciousness. That consciousness is the thing that you're measuring, that you're feeling, say, with gravity. Okay.
So, Marty, what do you mean it's not local? Because, if it depends on distance, doesn't that mean it's local?
No, local means it depends on distance and time. Like a sound wave. A sound wave moves out, and you have to be some distance away from it until you experience it. The same thing with light. When light has a source, okay, when I turn on my light bulb, it spreads out over time in a way at the speed of light. In this case, I move the thing a little distance away, and a very, very small distance, say, but the force changes instantly. There's no time factor. And it turns out there are a lot of physicists who are looking for what they call gravity waves because they appreciate this. Models.
So what does non-local mean again?
Non-local means instantaneous interaction. So it doesn't propagate. Notice sound propagates through space and time. Light propagates through space and time. And in fact, Einstein was very upset by the concept that quantum mechanics indicated there could be interactions which happen faster than the speed of light. This is an example of something happening, interacting faster than the speed of light, because there's no time term.
I see.
Marty?
Mm-hmm.
I had a question. I was talking to Joe recently, McMonagle. He was going over one of my papers, and I had the word non-local perception in there, you know, kind of pretty much like in place of remote viewing, because I know some people like to use that term better. And he suggested not using it because he said it's a physics word, and physicists would get some of them he's talked to say that the meaning that's it's intended in physics is different than when it's used in place of remote viewing. So he said, don't use that word, and I'm confused because I really don't understand the difference between how physicists traditionally used it and how it's being used, maybe how you're using it in the same way I would use it. But does that make any sense to you?
Well, the only way I could see you misusing it would be if you used it for present time remote viewing, because that would not be non-local. If you use it for precognition, then it would be okay to use non-local. So I don't know exactly what your context was, but if you use it in the context where it's instantaneous propagation of information, that would be non-local.
Okay, but if it's so someone's remote viewing a location in time.
At present time, you can think of all kinds of ways the information could have gotten between the two of them while the session was going on. So
even in the psychic realm still, but so that it's because I guess I thought of space and time. So non-local would be, you know, you're viewing, your remote viewing, you're using your psychic abilities to view a location, an outbounder in present time, but you're saying because it's present, you wouldn't say it was non-local, even though in space it's apart.
That's correct.
But, okay.
That's correct. Because I can think of mental telepathy in the old-fashioned way. I don't believe it works this way, but in the old-fashioned way, there were radio waves which are going back and forth at the speed of light. So at the speed of light, you could be connected with your target. So when we say present time, speed of light is pretty much present time.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. In fact, let me just now finish this off and then we can talk some more about it. This fits in, I believe, in a very deep way with what we do in both remote viewing and in present time, as well as precognitive remote viewing, period. As we've been doing it in ARV, as people do it when they look out, like Ingo Swann did when he looked at Saturn and saw the rings there before we got a satellite there, that kind of remote viewing. You know, it's clear we're connected to something rather deep and important. So here you are now. Let's let this dot be you. You are a thing in the way I defined it, and I believe you understand that now and hopefully appreciate it. So you're in the universe of collective consciousness, and you have your fuzzy boundary. Well, there's your fuzzy boundary. You've got a big fuzzy boundary. The reality is, through your fuzzy boundary, you're connected up to the entire universe. Now, the entanglements are of different energy levels, yes, and you would acknowledge that, and in fact, you want that. You don't want to remember everything right now, okay? I think Einstein, in fact, said something like time, oh, I should put that on this sheet. Time is around just so everything doesn't happen at once. maybe you can savor each moment. Anyway, it is through the fuzzy boundary that you're connected up to the entire universe. So that means that within you, the entire universe exists connected through a fuzzy boundary. Okay, I have. Okay, let me end it here. So thank you for that. That's my model of everything. I did have. Let me find it because I know it is here. I really wanted to end with a quote from Skip Atwater, which I think. Oh, I'm really upset. As always, for these, I just don't quite spend enough time on it. Let me do a search on Atwater. Well, I'm just going to give you the quote as best as I can remember it. It says, some say we leave. Basically, the point is we are with our spirit all the time. Gosh, he says it so beautifully. I'm so upset I can't. Okay, well, look, let's not take any more time. The fact is that, what is that?
I thought I found it here, just a second.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, there's a video of him saying it.
Where's my control F?
Some say we pass from the spiritual info into the physical at birth and from the physical into spirit at death. Actually, we are always spiritual beings, even when, now the quote ends here, and I don't find the rest of it.
Even when we pass from the physical world.
Okay.
In other words, that's really another way of saying we come from here. Here's spirit, right? Here's where we're connected to spirit. Okay? But when we die, we simply return to spirit, and spirit is with us all the time. That was his quote.
So it's also on Google here. Some say we pass from the spiritual into the physical at birth, and blah blah blah. Actually, we are always spiritual beings, even when having an earthly experience.
Right. So we are always connected to spirit, which means we are always connected to the words I've been using. We are always connected to the universe of collective consciousness. That would be the way I would put it. But he said it very beautifully. Okay, any other comments on any of this?
I like seeing the picture of the brain there. That's the first time I've seen that picture. I mean, I've read so much about left brain, right brain, but that was the best picture I've seen.
Well, I should send you the link that comes from, because it's a woman who is a neurologist or a neuroscientist of some sort, and she had a major medical problem.
Jill Cole Taylor, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, if you could find that link, and she talks about the state she was in when her right brain, what we usually think of as the more intuitive brain, when her right brain got severely damaged, she went to woo-woo land, and I mean, she felt connected to everything. I mean, it was sort of an example of what would happen when you, no, I guess the damage was in the left brain. And so all that was functioning was her right brain. So her intellect started going, and she got very much into the what we would call the non-physical world.
Yeah, she wrote a book called My Stroke of Genius, and she's all over the internet with that.
Right. She had a stroke.
I wanted to comment, if I could, about the presentation too.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, what I thought of when I was listening was Frank Drake's equation. And for those not familiar with it, you know, many years ago, he put out a 7-point equation on the probability, I'm looking on Wikipedia now, to arrive at an estimate of the number of active extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way. And he came up with 7 variables, none of which are very well known. Yet that equation has survived as sort of an important guideline for people for a long time. And I thought of it in regard to what you're saying, Marty, because you put together a very synoptic presentation covering, you know, all kinds of subjects, from quantum mechanics to gravity to zero-point energy to consciousness to microtubules. And so it's very suggestive and very inspiring, I think, to think about it in that way as an overall analogy and metaphor. And one thing I would suggest, if it's possible, if you're going to revise it at all for the presentation, is to, if you can come up with some specific nodes of it that are testable in practice, or that people have already tested in practice, or maybe there's not enough time to do all that, but maybe in footnotes or something, so that it's grounded in some actual experiments that, you know, I know the physics is, but the relation with consciousness is the more central part. So that's sort of my initial take on it.
Okay, well, thank you. You brought in ETs, extraterrestrials, and let me say that all of this works for them too. And I happen to believe, really just based on probabilities, that there are other extraterrestrials out there somewhere. It's hard to believe that we're the top of the consciousness chain. There've got to be living entities out there that are millions of years older than we are, so they've been well past what we're talking about here, and therefore it wouldn't surprise me if someday contact is made through consciousness and the UCC. So that may be the way we'll make connections with them.
Well, that introduces a whole other thing, which that close relationship between UFOs, aliens, and remote viewing. And I think several of us, many of us, believe that there's an intimate tie there, and that for sure aliens have been here and are here. And so that's just another complication. I didn't mean to introduce these UFOs just for that reason, just with the analogy with the Drake equation.
Yes, and I'd like to leave it at that, at least for me, and for APP, until they want to show themselves directly. I'd like to keep the entanglement at a minimum. It's there. There's no question it's there. So many RVers talk about it, but we don't have any concrete feedback. And they've chosen not to land on the White House lawn, that sort of thing. So let's just leave it at that. Mm-hmm. But in terms of testability, this idea, and you see, and this gets at the level of interpretations of quantum mechanics in a way, because, you know, if you're going to test this, we're going to test it in the physical world. We can test this by coming up with different ways of increasing entanglement energy and trying to think about things in terms of entanglement energy and put out a hypothesis. Now, one of the problems at APP is we just are not big enough, and we don't have money to do a test where, say, a person does a bunch of tests where they really work on increasing this entanglement energy. They really get into like a meditative state where they literally intend to increase their entanglement energy. I'm actually working on a cool down where that's going to happen. I'm working on it for myself now, and maybe I'll record it. But I think this whole idea, once you get this model in you, why not go down to this interface and work there? Work there and bring in energy from the UCC. So you can imagine an experiment where maybe two groups of people, one which really take this seriously and do this meditation, and the others that don't. But the problem with human subjects is, how do you know that the one group, let's say we get a big difference, how do you know that that group wasn't better than the other group in terms of the people? What we're talking about here actually gets very difficult to test. The experimenter effect gets involved. It just gets difficult to test. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but I think this is a model which can be used to increase personal precognitive capabilities, personal remote viewing capabilities, because I really believe this idea of entanglement energy is real.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because if people believe in the model and find it very valuable for them, then that will increase their capabilities, I would think, of viewing. Even though there's many other models out there, you know, various aspects of this,
Right.
you put it all together into one particular model that resonates with us in APP, it may, like you say, help us do better.
This is really interesting to me because there are hundreds of thousands of people in the psychic realm that are talking about these exact same things, but it's more in terms of empathy, of clairsentience, like feeling each other's energy, being impacted by each other's energy. That's really a large subject of my first book. So it's interesting that this is all coming around full circle. This is so important to so many people. It's just coming at it from a different approach. But it's all the same.
That's exactly right, Deborah. And I want to say this information has been out here. One of the valuable things I think about that might help just the kind of people you're talking about is to say, hey, wait a second, I've sort of known this, and now this connects up intellectually maybe a little more than I thought with classical science. I mean, I really believe this connects up with quantum mechanics. I really do. This idea that consciousness is fundamental kind of works. Anyway, it works for me. And if other people, and maybe your psychic people are just the right ones, who say, that feels right to me. Because it's not going to get proven at a much deeper level than this. This is really like an interpretation, okay, of where quantum mechanics comes from. That might make them actually better psychics, because they now feel a little bit deeper that, gee, this really does fit into the universe in a way that makes sense at a very deep level or something. I don't know.
Well, I think what it does is make them feel better that finally others are legitimizing what they've already been experiencing on a daily basis.
Right.
Because it's easy for so many people to just feel nuts, because the idea that, well, you can feel someone else's emotions, you can, hear their thoughts, whatever. A lot of people know this to be real, and I think that's why they get frustrated with science sometimes, because it's like, okay, well, this is my daily experience, and yet, you're denying it. So I think that people will find this approach very, very comforting. There's some validation there for them.
Have I made this simple enough that the conference you were telling me about in Los Angeles, that this could be presented there?
Yeah, I would say definitely, and I liked what John said as far as, and maybe combining what John said, and even, you know, some more examples for the people, because these people are experiencing this stuff all the time. So making sure that you tie it into, you know, their personal experiences and bringing the two together. That's what's going to make, whether it's their experiences or like maybe what John was saying, like I'm sure you have lots of great examples of how this works in the remote viewing stuff that we're doing all the time.
You know what might be good, Deborah, if we did a joint one, and you get at this from personal experiences, from the psychic personal experience that you've done. Anyway, that's a different subject, but you know what I'm doing, of course, is trying to come up with a way where we get just those people you're talking about, the science, the psychics that are out there. Why don't they come into APP? Why don't they come to our conference? Why don't they learn more about precognition, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a coming together of the two. I mean, I sincerely believe that in both areas, you know, in this area and in science, and it's not, we're not going to make the progress until the meeting of both groups come together, because it takes those who are just naturally experiencing things but don't really know how to either critically apply it or express it, and to you know, do so, to take what there's so many people having these experiences but they don't know how to put them into a focused way and apply them like we do in the Applied Precognition Project.
Yep.
You know, so it is really about coming together, and you know, again, there's all these people that they're already interested in this. You know, they're not the skeptics who cares about this stuff. So
yeah, and I think that's the next tier that we need to go to keep this grassroots growing of this new reality, and that it can have practical applications. Okay, good. Anybody else? Other comments?
There's a lot that can be done to tailor this to an audience that isn't physicists. You know, some of the cute stuff that Alexis was putting in his PowerPoints, you know, with the girls with the ponytails and just having a few examples of a person using this in a psychic way, and how this theory relates to that would be fun. Just like you said, to ground it more into the world of our experience.
Well, you know, it'd be terrific if, for example, you've got your Meet It group. Take something like this and expand on it, and you know, share it with them. You know, anybody, love nothing more than to have various versions of this out there, because I do believe it's just another point of view, but it's a valuable point of view, because people can work with it.
So when I was doing that cool down in Vegas, I pointed to this screen and I said, you know, we're going to show the feedback photo here, and just as you can reach up and touch this screen because it's close in space, you can also touch the feedback photo, which is we're going to show a few hours from now because it's close in time, or everything is pretty much close in time.
Right.
So this theory you've got here gives more credibility to that thought.
Yep, I think that's a good example. That's perfect. And I noticed Deborah did all of this. Let's try to do that. Deborah, I know, said, I'm going to be holding the picture right here, you know, making that real, and increasing this entanglement. I mean, this is from the perspective of, and it was intended to be from the perspective of a practical application to build from here. You know, there have got to be lots of other ways we haven't even thought of enhancing the entanglement energy. Yeah. In fact, I wonder if at feedback time you were to do the same meditation that you did at remote viewing time, you know, with the same intensity and all the same intentions, and realizing, just as you said, that not only can you touch it, it's the same. You're really doing the two sessions at the same time, um, and having that as a mindset, if that would in fact enhance the energy. But hopefully different people will experiment with different approaches. I'm going to put out one other really, really far out thing here, and it probably goes best in maybe this picture. In fact, let's say it goes best. I wasn't sure I was going to raise this because it is so speculative, but here, I want to remove this. You guys, one of the things I love about app is I can do this. If I was at a formal scientific convention or something, I could never do any of this stuff, and it's fun for me. Take a look at this schematic that somebody else put together. I don't know where I found this, but I loved it because at one level you can look at it as being the very, very, very large. You look at these things as being small. I'm sorry, being large, being stars, right? But there's another level where you can really see yourself going down and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I really love that because that's what I think zero-point energy does. But, hey, what is this out here? Maybe that's dark energy. Aha! And dark mass. I mean, I wonder if missing that consciousness is as fundamental as it is has limited our equations. When they talk about dark energy and dark mass, they are talking about missing, I don't remember the numbers now, but I think one or the other was at 97%. We're missing, if you use the current equations, to get the way the universe is expanding. Physicists can't use their current models without postulating this magic extra energy and magic extra mass. Period. Let's just leave it at that. Their current equations don't work for the very large without introducing huge amounts of this. Maybe they're missing consciousness. How's that for a far out hypothesis? And the other point I would make is there was on Time magazine, if I ever present this again, maybe I'll show that, about fusion is real, maybe. This idea of cold fusion has come back, and there's a lot of money. There's actually a lot of money being spent now on cold fusion. And you know what? Maybe that has to do with this consciousness field in some way. I say that because, again, you're talking about things which our current science hasn't really much of a clue about right now. Okay, I'm going to...
I had a question. Would you say that, like, healing energy, we know we can transfer healing energy from one person to another, or whether it's healing energy or negative bad energy, we know how to do that. So would you say healing energy is the same as zero-point energy? Like everything in the whole universe is zero-point energy, but you can manipulate it, and that's been proven in many scientific studies.
The answer is, I wouldn't say it quite that way, but very close. The way I would say it is maybe here. Wait, here. That we are buried in this universe of collective consciousness. Energy is in here. Zero-point energy is the connection between all of these vague idea things and time and space and biology and people, but so are, and if I were to do this again, I would add intentions in here. Intentions are a part of the consciousness flow, okay? And so healing energy does come from this 0 point energy field for sure, and it's the intentions to heal that make the connections, in my opinion.
So
So
the intention is like the vehicle of delivery.
of
You
the
know,
that's right, and the 0 point energy connects as healing energy based on the intentions and based on an enhancement which comes, I would say, from your intentions and maybe from your training. I mean, people learn how to do this. How do you put Qigong? I've seen pictures of these, and I think they're Chinese people that can can they'll have a bunch of people headed towards them, and they will push them away with an energy field. And I'm sure you're thinking of healing energy where there's like a spontaneous healing of some sort. All of this comes from a combination of using the 0 point energy, intentions start down in the UCC, and then enhancing and directing that energy. So the answer is yes, with that kind of viewpoint of how the UCC interacts with the physical world.
and then really this circle you have up here, it seems to correspond with, I think it was Rupert Sheldrake who came up with morphic fields. Did he come up with it, or?
Yeah, well, again, morphic fields and all of these stuff, they're all interrelated. But sure, you can imagine if you had 100 monkeys, the more focused on the same idea and the same thing, you could see how that might, again, through the UCC, influence other monkeys. They'd pick it up into what you might say is almost a telepathic way without even knowing it. It would come up through their subconscious. So I didn't use that word much here just because I overuse it, so I thought I'd do it differently here. But, the subconscious is the way the I think, connects to the 0 point energy field and down into the UCC.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Deborah. I mean, I think you get these, and that's the whole point of all of this. Interpretations, metaphors, are like that. They're things which you grok. I think most of you hopefully know that word grok. I mean, you get deep down. You get down at this interface level, and it permeates into your whole being. And that's what these kind of models are supposed to do. I mean, if you're trying to get an idea of something as basic as consciousness, this is one way of discussing it. Okay. So maybe we're done. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up?
Can I ask something?
Of
Could you
course.
give me the screen really quick?
Sure. Make presenter. There you go.
Can you see this?
Yep.
Yeah, just 2 days ago, this guy started a meetup And I found RV pretty much through Meetup. And he's going to be doing, the name of the group is Monroe, the South Bay Monroe Institute Meetup. It's only 5 minutes from me. And this guy says he's a certified Monroe teacher. Here I have.
What's his name? Garrett? What's his last name?
He doesn't give his last name, but he says he's a certified outreach trainer.
Okay, yep. I
Monroe.
know that program.
Yeah. Does anyone actually know this guy?
I don't know him, but as a part of the app, and as one of our goals is to spread the word, if you will, that would be great if you could contact him.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe give a presentation there, maybe have him come to us.
He didn't give us a lot of notice, but I might go there Sunday at 3. It'll be right after the chicken dinner prediction. But I might want to go there and practice, because he's actually going to play DVDs, and we're going to go down into lower states of consciousness. And he's got earphones, and he's encouraging us to bring sleeping bags and something useful to kind of conk out on. And I don't know, it's just kind of cool. I've never heard of anyone doing anything like this.
No, I have. He'll probably play the it's called RV10, or level 10 or something. They have different hemisync.
Oh yeah, I knew they did it at the Monroe Institute.
Oh yeah, and they have ways of doing it with the outreach.
Right. I actually have all those DVDs. I just haven't listened to them yet.
But this idea of using Meetup and others, because I know there are other Meetup groups. I got in touch with yours, and then I just sort of gave up. But I think now is a time for people, some of us in app, and I think Michelle is taking this on, and maybe we can get some other people to take it on, to make contacts with these Meetup groups. Join them, meet the people, and get them to go the other way. I think we need to go to them before they're going to come to us.
Right.
So that's great.
Here's a riddle for you. Anyone heard this one?
The poor have, the rich one, and if you eat it, you will die. I don't know what.
Anyone? I got it in 2 minutes because I heard it on this TV show.
Okay, well, let's think about it. What do the poor have, the rich want, and if you eat it, you will die? Okay, I give up.
All right, the answer for this one was nothing.
Oh, that's good.
This was actually a joke the Riddler told to Professor Gordon, Batman fame.
Oh, I need to use that. Put that in the chat box.
Okay.
I mean, obviously that fits my presentation.
Yeah, I thought of it when you.
Well, that's good.
And it was good. I told that to Sunny too, because she's a nutritionist who's trying to get people to eat while they're in the hospital, and they have no appetite.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's good. I like that. I'm copying that. Okay, everybody. We're at about 2 hours, which is usually when we like to stop. Anybody else want to make any comments? Bring up any subjects? Yeah, thank you, Teresa, for the first time looking at the chat box. Okay, well, folks, thank you for coming, and keep precogging and stay conscious, and we will obviously all stay in touch. And do spread the word about App 2016. Now is the time to get in. And there's one other thing which you'll be hearing about. We're talking about starting a referral program where everybody who is in app can earn $50 by bringing somebody who is not in app to the conference. So let's leave it at that, and you all have a great day and a great weekend.
Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Marty.